what we've got here is a programming question that says you've got a 1D array called student name, which contains the students in your class, and you've also got a 2D array which is called student mark, which contains the mark for each subject. What that means is, me as a student, imagine this is A-levels, alright? I could do 3 A-levels if I wanted, alright? But what we're going to assume for this question is it contains the mark for each subject and each student. The position of each of the students' data in the arrays is the same. That's basically saying you've got 2 arrays going, alright? One is a 2D array and one is a 1D array, alright? For example, the student in position 10 and student mark would be the same. I'm going to show you what that means in a minute. The variable class size contains the number of students in the class. The variable subject number contains the number of subjects studied. All students study the same number of subjects. So we're going to assume in this case that all students have the same number of subjects. It's not a case of like where some students do 4 A-levels and some do 3. Just for the purpose of this, we're going to assume everybody is the same. Now you're going to get, you've got to set up arrays to store the data, and you're awarded based on the average mark. So I'm going to also talk to you about the maths involved. Sometimes you will need to add up the value of arrays to do that. And then they've given you your if statements here, basically, in a nice little grid for you. When you see conditions like this, you know there's going to be some form of selection somewhere, alright? And even if you can't do the array in your code, you will get marks for attempting the selection. There's usually 4 marks at the beginning of every question for using the variables I've said, using some form of selection, some form of iteration, and that's kind of how they structure the questions. So look at what we've got to do here. We've got to calculate the combined total mark for each student. What that means is we're going to need to go through each of the marks on the array. You're also going to need to work out the average. We know that every student does the same number of subjects. So what you would need to do is go through that array. Say, for example, I had the score 50, 20, and 70. Add those 3 together and divide them by 3. That's what that's talking about. Output the name, total mark, average mark, grade awarded, and output how many distinctions, passes, or fails are in the whole class. Now, I'm not going to go through right the way to the end today because I want to give you an opportunity to try and do the rest yourself. But what I am going to do is I'm going to start this off just so you can visualize it, and I'd like you to make some notes as well. In this case, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you what the 1D array might look like, alright? For the purpose of this, they may in your exam actually give you the list of students, alright? But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set up mine to begin with. So I'm going to say student name equals, and we're going to say Ray, comma, Bob, comma, Harry, comma, let's go for Ijan. Right. That's a 1D array. But just so you are aware, alright, we've got position 0, 1, 2, 3. Remember how those arrays work. Let me just improve the focus a second. So I'd like you to set up your individual array to begin with. Right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up their marks. Remember, every student has the same amount of marks. For the purpose of this, I'm just going to do 3. Alright? Generally, in the exam, they will give you what they want. So, let's set up the student marks. Alright, so student marks equals. Now the key thing about this one is it says it's a 2D array. That is an array within an array, basically. So how many students have I got? 4. So that means there are going to need to be 4 rows. So what I'm going to do is set up the first bracket, but then I'm going to do scores 80, 75, 90. So that's row 1, comma. So I'm going to do row 2 now, which is, you can write your arrays like this if it helps you visualize what they look like, okay? I do not mind this, and neither will the examiner, because it will make it easier for them to mark if they can see how your array is set up. Sometimes they will just say the array is already set up for you, alright? And my last person is going to be 45, 50, and 55. That's the end of that now. To separate each row, I put a comma, alright? I don't need to do it on the last one, alright? So, to show that that is the end of it, there we go. Now, that would be position 0, which matches Ray. That would be position 1, which matches Bob. 2, which matches Harry. And 3 is Yam. Okay, so can you see how that works? But again, with a 2D array, although I know what's in position 0, 1, 2, 3, each of those, then you would iterate through the column to get the data. Remember? So you do for row in range, however many, for column in range, and then you iterate through that. But I'm going to show you that how we do that in a minute. What I'm going to do though is split this into 2 parts. So the first thing I want to do, alright, is I want to create an array that's got their total scores, alright? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to need to iterate through this for each student to work out what their total score is. So realistically speaking, alright, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work out the class size first. So I've got my iteration. Now to do the class size, all I do is type it, class size equals len, and I'm going to find the len of the students in my class. Alright, so student name. Now that's the value there, just so you can see what it would be. That's why I write it in a different colour. The value of that would be 1, 2, 3, 4. Because when we use len, we count from 1. So the value of this would be equivalent to 4. Alright? Now, I want to know how many subjects there are. Now what I can do is subject number equals len. All I'm going to do is pick one of the rows. I know every student, think about it logistically here, I know every student studies the same number of subjects, so all I need to use is only one of the rows really. So I'm going to find the length of student marks, watch, student marks row 0, because I know every single student on that list, I know every single one of them has the same number of subjects. So what is the value of subject number going to be? 3. So that's going to be 3 there. Amazing. Alright, so if you need to watch that back, pause it at this point and then rewind it. But ultimately, I'm just showing you how I'm setting up the program first, and you will need to do that a lot of the time when you're writing your answers to questions, so that you can use values. All right. Now, what I want to do, all right, is I want to work out the total mark for each student. Now, what I'm going to need to do is set up an array. All right. So I'm going to set up a brand new array, okay, called let's student total marks equals So that's a blank array. So what I've done here, I'm going to just do a hashtag there, is I've set up my blank array. Because if we go back to this, I'm going to need to work out what their total mark is. Now the only way I can do that now is to work out what that is and then add it to this. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to create another variable called total marks. Equals 0. Because I'm going to use that as a placeholder when I iterate through it, so I can